Thank you so much, and welcome to Amsterdam. What a nice setting that we have here. And welcome to everybody who's joining online. Grids for Speed. I still very much remember the moment where I got presented Grids for Speed as a study. And I must say, it was Greece, the Eurelectric Power Summit, and I was pretty amazed. I mean, first of all, I saw it on stage being presented, and it looked like a pretty spot-on study. And when I was digging deeper, I learned how foundational it is and how much real intensive good work there was behind. So the next thing I did when coming home, I sent it to all of our colleagues at Siemens and said, this is it, they nailed it. So we were very, very pleased to see that Ernst & Young and Eurelectric collaborated on a very fine report there. And when we were then asked to join or sponsor Grids for Speed as a series, it was almost like a no-brainer, because it very much laid out the foundation of how we think about grids and how we can best achieve the challenges and tackle the challenges that are lying in front of us. And grid capacity certainly is, at the moment, the #1 challenge. That goes hand in hand with modernization, which only makes it harder to increase the grid capacity. That goes hand in hand with customer satisfaction, because while you try to keep up with the capacity needs, you gotta better keep your customers happy and make sure that consumers are in the right spot and that we don't have queues exploding and waiting times exploding. And underlying all of those, there is the digitalization challenge, and I think that's something that the Grids for Speed report nicely pointed out. It's the amount of investment that we would need to do if we ignored all the smart things in the world, ignored the power of digitalization, using more capacity from the existing grid, using flexibility as a means, making smart anticipatory investments. So the effect, to quantify that effect with 12 billion annually, was really one of the cornerstones of this report. I would dare to say that this report also played a big role in the EU grid package. So there's a big influence of this collective membership weighing in behind that report and really seeing the national adoption of that and the influence going to that. I must say, reading the EU package, we're pretty pleased, with maybe 2 exceptions. The one exception is it still speaks a lot about TSOs, and the challenge definitely is equally big or bigger from a complexity standpoint when it comes to TSOs. And secondly, it really doesn't address the topic of digitalization enough, because there's so much to be had in our industry if we do that right. And again, the Grids for Speed report did quantify that in a really nice way to say how much can be had in terms of affordability, stability, speed, if we get that right. So a lot to talk about, a lot to continue to put forward and make sure that there's maybe an iteration of that package to include those 2 topics as well. And with that, I think there's enough ground to be laid for a really intense discussion. And we saw the program earlier, really good input from a lot of different perspectives. So very much looking forward to hearing from you all. And with that,
now we will kick off this meeting with a fireside chat. So we'll look at some of the key topics that are on the radar today, and also what we will be discussing in the Grids for Speed Hub programming this year. So please welcome to the stage Aida Garcia from Eurelectric, the head of our Infrastructure, AI, and Market Intelligence units. I would also like to welcome Ralf Blumenthal, our SVP of Europe from Siemens Grid Software. And then, of course, Oliver Franz, who actually has 2 hats, but today you're going to wear the hat of Eurelectric's distribution and Market Facilitation Committee. So for those of you who do not know, this is the committee within Eurelectric that shapes positions on DSO-related topics at the level of the European Union. So please give them a warm round of applause.
Thank you, Gustav. Just checking that you can hear us. Okay, yeah, perfect. Thanks for introducing also the great speakers for this fireside chat. During the next 20 minutes, we have two main objectives. The first one is to give you a little bit of a flavor of the topics that will be covered in the Grids for Speed sessions for the remainder of the year. And the second one is to bring you the latest insights from a policy perspective that are coming from Brussels. At the beginning of the year, we were all busy analyzing the grids package that was more focused on investments, on unlocking those investments in grids, while recently we've seen a bit of pressure to keep the system costs down for consumers, and we expect legal proposal at the end of the month. So we'll try to cover all this with Oliver and with Ralf. Warm welcome to both of you. Let's get started, maybe with Oliver. We are seeing a major increase in grid investments. I think ACER projects around 47 billion already next year. Do you think the grids package will help materialize those investments, or do you think that there are some elements missing there?
Well, first of all, I'm happy about the number because we are getting close to the 55, and I would believe that Thierry is also happy because we're in the margin of error right now, I would suggest, for a study like that. So if you want, we have now empirical proof that what we were projecting is A, possible, and B, probably also necessary. In terms of the grids package, Sabine was mentioning earlier it is maybe a bit TSO heavy or focused. If there is one thing that could actually become a game changer for grid investments, it is probably the permitting issue. Because we keep, in talking to members about single projects, we keep getting the feedback that depending on what you want to do and where you want to do it, it can last up to 7-10 years before you actually get all the permitting together to then finally build the stuff. And building it in itself is then not that much of a problem. That takes you, depending on the size of the project and how much help you have from Siemens maybe, it might take you, let's say, a year and a half, 2 years, and then you get the project done. But we have one which is what the Germans call Ersatzneubau. So we are actually in a corridor. We're just trying to replace what we have, maybe adding some capacity. 3 German states involved, and it takes us 10 years to do that. And that's just too long. So my main hope with regards to the investment is really on the permitting, I would suggest.
Super. Ralf, do you see it the same way? What changes would you make to make those investments happen?
Well, I think clearly it's a huge investment wave coming, and the grids package has good elements to support that. How it then is realized really depends on a lot of things, but maybe in addition to permitting, I think what is clearly nice and good, recognize that there needs to be more of EU coordinated planning activities, right? So that we get more transparency in what is really needed where in terms of assets and connections, interconnections, etc. And on the third side, of course, also very nice that is recognized that grid enhancing technologies will need to play a stronger role than in the past. And that's clearly a step forward. But, and as Sabine also mentioned in the beginning, digitalization is mentioned and somehow recognized, but it's definitely not at the core yet. And also the incentivization is also a big topic moving forward. Right? It's still left a bit loose, right? The first come, first serve limitations are recognized, but how then that translates into individual regulations on country level is a big question mark. So I think there is still a refinement needed, if I had a wish, right?
Yeah.
Definitely to recognizing TOTEX incentivation, because that is, if that were the regulatory default, could also help to incentivize further use of grid enhancing technologies and digitalization. Anticipatory investments, that they are also allowed by default. And the third one is that it's a binding digitalization initiative, especially on distribution level, where we then move to viewing distribution grids more on a performance level that comes along with the visibility and data flows that would then be enabled. I think that would really, really strengthen the capacity increase of using all levers that we have, in addition to cable and hardware investments, all the way to using more of what we have right now.
Very good, very useful recommendations for the co-legislators that are now refining the grids package. Let's switch gears now to maybe the grid users. So we are seeing very different new loads coming online, from distributed EVs to large and concentrated data centers. Maybe if I can pick your brains, Ralf, what would you say are the main challenges in integrating those new loads?
Well, that's clearly the deep dive topic then for the Power Summit, which I kindly, cordially invite you all to join then. But definitely, our grids were not made for what you just described as, on the one hand, we're seeing millions of new loads on distribution and low voltage level especially. At the same time, we're seeing load demands at the levels of small cities, data centers and other large infrastructures that need to be connected extremely fast to secure competitiveness of entire economies. And so here we're talking about speed, we're talking about the ability to match it. And I think if we look at what needs to change there, yes, the connection cycles are not fit for purpose, right? It takes much too long to decide where and when to connect and how to connect. So I think that's where digitalization can also play a huge role in automating that as much as possible, and then getting clear visibility on where to connect, when and how. Lack of visibility is then also a big one, because if we don't know exactly which capacity is available where and which loads are needed where, well then we're always estimating, and estimates usually have the effect that we're overestimating certain things or the impact of certain things. So we really need data to flow interoperably. We really need operators to being able to have accurate demand forecasts and capacity forecasts. Then regulation, I think, well, we're talking a lot about it, right? It still favors steel and not only steel, well, stronger, more steel focused than data focused. And then lastly, I think we also need to accept that this is a big change in terms of mindset and expertise needed, right? Because we're changing the fundamental mindset of how grids operate and how they need to be operated, both on the grid operator side, but then also on the how do we interact with those who need these connections fast on the industrial and demand side. So I think it's not just a technology problem, it's really a challenge about transforming an entire market.
Super. Oliver, feel free to react also to Ralf's statements, but if I could also pick